Our mission is we are a community of spiritual seekers inspired to promote a just and compassionate world. Today, we welcome to our pulpit longtime member and chair of the worship committee, friend and fellow seeker of earth-based spirituality, Marie Laberge. Today's musician is Karen Barker. So we now have our gathering music. Karen?
She is the weaver, she weaves the night sky. See how she spins, see her fingers fly. She is within us, beginning to end. Our grandmother, sister, and friend. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. She is the weaver and we are the web. She is the needle and we are the thread. She is within us, beginning to end. Our grandmother, sister, and friend. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes.
Thank you for that, Karen. I am now vibrating. Our call to worship is from Lucy Pierce from her book, Burning Woman. For some, she came in a dream. For others, in words as clear as a bell. It is time. I am here. She may come in a whisper so loud she can deafen you, or a shout so quiet you strain to hear. She may appear in the waves or the face of the moon, in a red goddess or a crow. Who is she? She is your power, your feminine source. Big Mama, the goddess, the great mystery, the web weaver, the life force. The first time, the 20th time, you may not recognize her or pretend not to hear. As she fills your body with ripples of terror and delight. But when she calls, you will know you've been called. And then it's up to you to decide if you will answer.
Nancy selected this piece from the Unitarian Universalist Association worship page, and she thought it was appropriate for today as a chalice lighting. This is The Goddess by Misha Sanders, and this is her voice speaking. In a sacred place of honor, in the temple that is my home, stands a gleaming, powerful image of the Venus of Willendorf, pictured here, proud and naked, her unbound breasts resting on her belly, her full rotund belly, blissful and heavy with the ripeness of all life and the sweet milk that sustains it, having no apologies to make for the fat fullness of her thighs, grown strong and proud from the carrying of this wide expanse of hips, and a rump of roundness of which has enchanted poets and priests since before time. The wise goddess child, who is my daughter, calls the image the mommy dell. And she has no interest in the notion that maybe this lush feminine form was not fashioned to look like me. How then can I face this child and not stand tall and be a goddess? In whatever size I am, be content. I do not need minimizing panels in my panties or wires in my bra to be divine and full of beauty. Full of beauty, not starving for affection, approval, appreciation, confirmation, conformity, or anonymity, but fully at home in the body of this woman who takes up her share of space without saying, I'm sorry, and still leaves room enough in the world for you. So, to you and to me And to the wise goddess child who is my daughter, I say fearlessly and wondrously are we made in the image of she who is most holy, and the blasphemy of body hatred has no place in this temple. We light this chalice in honor of the goddess. Blessed be. Marie's sermon is entitled The Great Mother Goddess. Marie?
Good morning. Good morning. And happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all who are mothers. Happy Mother's Day to all who have mothers. And happy Mother's Day to all who have, over the course of their lives, mothered other beings on this planet, whether they were two-legged, four-legged, or winged ones, or indeed spent time mothering the great Earth Mother herself. I am Marie Laberge, probably best known to most of you as that crazy lady from the worship team that often asks you to consider presenting a service or to help us in the many tasks needed to ensure the success of the services. Whether it's the chairs, the tech support, thank you, the altar decorations, hospitality, ushers, or indeed stepping in at the last minute to be a worship associate. Thank you. In my life outside of UUFN, I'm a historian, and I am soon to be retired from the from the university, having taught for 27 years in the Department of Women and Gender Studies. That's significant for two reasons, one of which I will get back to later. But the first one is I'm actually more nervous standing here before you all than I've ever been in front of the classroom, and those undergrads are a rough crowd. I'm going to do what Jamie says and ground myself. Part of it is because I have historically known that I'm an outlier here in this congregation. I know I'm in the minority when I say I believe in divine spirit. I believe and take comfort from a divinity that is present in the cosmos around us and that I often call upon in my times of need. Although as I look at this crowd, I'm wondering if that might not be changing somewhat. The original title of this service was The Mother Goddess and Why She is Important to Me. And then I immediately erased that second part. But in fact, that is what I will be discussing. But more importantly, perhaps, is why she just might be important to you. The great Mother Goddess archetype has been present in most cultural representations of the divine. But you often have to go very far back in history, perhaps even to prehistory, in order to find her, since patriarchy has done such a great job of trying to erase her. I say trying because she continues to assert herself in some very interesting ways. In my final semester of teaching last spring, I taught my goddesses class, finally. And the textbook that I settled on was Anne Baring's and Jules Cashford's The Myth of the Goddess, Evolution of an Image. I have it here. I'm sure you can imagine my students' response when they realized it was a 700-page text. I loved it. I doubt they read it. I do appreciate what the authors did, however, and they covered a lot of ground, although it could have been edited by about 150 or 200 pages. The book traces the history of evolving human consciousness through the centuries, from 20,000 BC and the Paleolithic and Neolithic periods to the Bronze Age, Iron Age, and beyond. They draw upon art, mythology, poetry, literature, archaeology, and psychology to show what the goddess symbolized, how the myth of the goddess has been lost from our images of the divine, and what that loss means to us. Starting with the ancient drawings of cave walls, there's a really weird echo here, I just want you to know. The Paleolithic sculptures and the Neolithic megaliths, They describe a great mother goddess who gives birth to a cosmos that is itself a part of her divine substance. All that she created was part of her. Archaeological evidence, as the Venus of Willendorf that you saw earlier, strongly suggests that these prehistoric ancestors worshipped a great goddess known by many names, expressed in many manifestations. She was the creatrix and mother of all. Goddess religion was earth-centered and life-affirming. Humanity was interconnected with nature. Death was a part of life. Worship of the goddess was sensual, physical, and celebrated the body. She was revered as the force responsible for renewal and regeneration of life. In this early phase of humanity, all of creation was manifest out of a single life giver. The world and everything in it was considered sacred. All beings were understood to come from and be part of her divine body, including nature, humanity, and other gods. I want to repeat that because I think it's really important. All beings come from and are part of her divine body, and all that she created was part of her. All that she created, therefore, was itself divine. She went by many names: Inanna, the great goddess of Sumeria; Ishtar, the goddess of Babylonia; Namu, the primordial great mother goddess of the heavenly waters and the abyss of space; Ninhursag, mother of the gods, humanity, as well as earth and wild animals. In ancient Greece, she was Gaia, the great mother of all life and the mother of the gods. The Neolithic goddess from Crete, representations down here, which I brought home from Crete. The snake goddess has thick, folded, snake-like arms and legs, and a beaked face, symbolizing the creative power of divinity as source and sustainer of the world, which is the divine body. In ancient Greece, Isis represented the great goddess in her capacity as cosmic mother, godmother, queen of heaven. As we move into these later periods, you begin to see the interaction between the mother goddess and God. Born as her son, in time he grows up to become her lover and consort. Everything still is considered alive and sacred, but now there's a perception of change of time, a difference between eternal and temporal, of seasonal growth and decay. This leads to a differentiation between energy and form, and later to distinctions of spirit and nature, mind and matter, soul and body. Ultimately, the transcendent God replaced the immanent goddess. The patriarchal theology that comes to replace goddess worship begins to designate as inferior all things associated with the feminine. In this stage, it is the male patriarchal God who creates the world without any female involvement, often simply by speaking or breathing creation into being. The Hebrew God, Yahweh Elohim, made heaven and earth out of the void. The Christian version of this separates the world even further from sacred source. Adam is first made from inanimate clay, not from the divine body. He only comes alive when spirit is breathed into him. And Eve is then shaped from one of his ribs, even further from the sacred. In this view, humans are animated by a disembodied, transcendent spirit. However, animals, plants, minerals don't receive this honor and remain inanimate. They are referred to as it and considered inferior to the spiritual nature of humanity, which at least had been breathed into life by that disembodied God. So the previous intricate web connecting all life was replaced with a system which ranked males at the head and legitimized their power and authority over all humanity and nature. The world itself is no longer seen as sacred and alive, but inert, inanimate material. God has separated from the goddess and come to stand alone as the creator of the world. Creation becomes separate from the creative source. In some of this mythology, the mother goddess is killed by the god, who then creates the world from her dead body. One of the earliest and actually quite graphic examples of this is the Babylonian story of creation, Enuma Elish. It's a very long text, which describes quite graphically the defeat and mutilation of the great goddess Tiamat. Known as the mother of all, she is murdered by her grandson Marduk, who splits open her lifeless carcass and creates the skies and the land from her mutilated body. The land is still female, but its powers have been subdued and appropriated by a male god. I could go on at great length about the various ways patriarchal cultures sought to destroy the goddess, but instead I will mention that even as they attempt to erase her, she returns in various guises. However devalued and debased, she did not go away. For example, in the Hebrew culture, the rabbis constantly, and you read it in the Hebrew Bible over and over again, they are constantly admonishing the Hebrew people to worship only Yahweh, the one God, and to forsake the goddess. Yet over and over again, they bring her statues back to the temple to worship her, and they make offerings in the sacred groves to her. Later in the ancient Hebrew tradition, the Shekinah develops as the image of the divine feminine in the mystical tradition of Judaism, which was transmitted orally for thousands of years until it flowered in the writings of the Jewish Kabbalists in medieval Spain and France. The Shekinah is divine motherhood, named as mother of all living. She brings together heaven and earth, the divine and human, in a vision of unity and interconnected web of life. Gershom Scholem writes that the idea of this divine feminine element was one of the most important and lasting innovations of Kabbalism. He continues, the fact that it obtained recognition in spite of the obvious difficulty of reconciling it with the conception of the absolute unity of God, Yahweh, is proof that it responded to a deep-seated religious need. The Shekinah, the Holy Spirit of wisdom, provides the missing imagery of divine immanence that is obscured in the traditional theology of Judaism and Christianity. In Christianity, the mother goddess is subsumed in the present shape of Mary, mother of Jesus. In the Bible, she plays just a bit role. There's actually very little about Mary in the actual biblical text. And yet the church itself had to grapple with her at the Council of Ephesus in 431, and to grapple with her sacredness and the meaning of her. And they elevate her to God-bearer, naming her Theotokos. This is necessary because the divine feminine is such an important need to the people. And they flock to her. You see her presence, especially, interestingly enough, in the great cathedrals in Europe, and especially the Notre Dame cathedrals. I had the opportunity to walk the labyrinth in Chartres. And in Chartres, that Notre Dame cathedral is solely about and for Mary. There are multiple altars only to Mary in that cathedral. What's also really interesting in that cathedral is that in the crypt of it, where there is no bodies because it's all about, the whole church is about Mary, the baptismal font is literally sitting on the site of a former sacred spring where peoples for millennia came and presented offerings to her. Archaeologists found the offerings that people had left for the millennia. So they are literally building this enormous, beautiful cathedral on top of a sacred site for the goddess. I like to think that when those children are baptized at that baptismal font, that they are also getting the blessings of the goddess because it is on that spring. So the Mary of Christianity echoes the great goddess in her capacity as the mother of God, the womb that brings forth renewal and salvation. She is the feminine principle of relationship that connects all things to each other. She is understood and worshipped as the compassionate and healing one. So in spite of patriarchy's attempt to smother all evidence of her, the great goddess was never fully forgotten. glimmers of her former glory continue to surface. I mentioned earlier that I taught women and gender studies for 27 years. So I fully get all the debates about gender and the discussions that we've had for the last 3 decades, or 3 feels like decades, but sort of 30 or 40 years. And especially in this context, a critique about whether the divine has gender. I mean, seriously, we're talking about divine spirit. Divinity is kind of beyond social categories like gender and race. So if you push me, I will acknowledge that. I will acknowledge divine spirit beyond all categories. However, I shall continue to refer to the divine as she, the divine feminine, goddess, because I need her. I believe we all need her. As long as we live in a misogynistic society where women are second-class citizens, we need the divine feminine. As long as women continue to live under the threat of violence, we need the divine feminine. As long as women do not have say over their own bodily integrity, we need the divine feminine. A few weeks ago, the Supreme Court just had a hearing on a case, Idaho and Moyle versus the United States. Outraged me. I could go on for hours on this one. It was a case brought by extreme politicians seeking permission to disregard a federal statute called the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, EMTALA. They essentially want to allow the state to put doctors in jail for providing pregnant patients necessary emergency medical care. And if that request wasn't outrageous enough, some of the justices, who I'm sure you can figure out which ones, were actually suggesting it is just fine to wait until the women are literally on the verge of death before an emergency care doctor could treat her without the risk of jail. They were claiming it was the right thing to do, ironically, because they're supposedly protecting a life. It just wasn't her life. So until such a time as the women of Idaho, Florida, Texas, Afghanistan, name a location, there were so many of them, until women are fully seen as human and treated as such with dignity, grace, and respect, then I shall continue to pray to the divine feminine. I shall construct my altars to celebrate her being. I shall breathe in her essence during my daily worship. I shall call on her in my times of need, drop the burdens of my soul into her lap, and allow her to comfort me in those dark nights. I shall continue to bear witness to the expressions of her compassion, love, beauty, wisdom, grace that I see around me every day, in the landscape and in the hearts and souls of this community and beyond. Her presence is needed more than ever, and not just by me. Andrew Harvey, in his book, The Divine Feminine, writes, "Wisdom, justice, beauty, harmony, and compassion are the qualities that have traditionally been identified, as the divine feminine. The divine feminine is the unseen dimension of the soul to which we are connected through our instincts, our feelings, and the longing imaginations of our heart. The Divine Mother is asking us to trust and protect life, to work with her in all that we do, opening our understanding to the knowledge that we are not separate from herself, but an expression of her being. When we honor the divine feminine, we allow that divinity, which is immanent in all, to be truly embodied in both the female as well as the male. We enable a version of and a vision of all of us as the possibility of love embodied. And in doing so, we help deconstruct and dismantle the destructive, misogynistic, patriarchal traditions that deny the sacredness of all of our lives. I close by saying simply, Namaste. The divine in me acknowledges the divine in you. Happy Great Mother Day. Please join me in singing our closing hymn. We all
come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain blowing through the ocean. Rain and corn, all that lives shall be reborn. Rose and thorn, all that lives shall be reborn. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain flowing to the ocean. Hoof and horn, those who live shall be reborn. Human form, those who live shall be reborn. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain flowing to the ocean. Sage and crone, wisdom's gift shall be our own. Crone and sage, wisdom is a gift of age. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain flowing to the ocean.
Now we will extinguish our chalice. Please join in reading aloud the chalice extinguishing. The words are in your order of service and on the screen. We extinguish the flame of our chalice, but not the light of understanding, the warmth of this community, or the fire of commitment, which we hold in our hearts, share with the world every day until we're together again.
Our closing words are from Starhawk. The goddess is not separate from the world. She is the world and all things in it. Moon, sun, earth, star, stone, seed, flowing river, wind, wave, leaf and branch, bud and blossom, fang and claw, woman and man. The goddess does not rule the world. She is the world. Manifest in each of us, she can be known internally by every individual in all her magnificent diversity.